Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Yeah, I know this is like the 20th video, but I want to make sure my patrons get their money's worth. Actually, it has more so to do with the news. When there's a story afoot, I tend to be more active on the story because, especially stories that bother me, stories of war and suffering bother me, especially things that can step us into those conflicts. Trump breaks the nuclear accord. Trump rebuffs the entire world in order to break the nuclear accord. Trump isolates the United States in breaking, the Iran nuclear accord. Iran has been living up to the tenets of the accord according to everyone else around the globe. Donald Trump, Netanyahu, and a 32-year-old maniac who gets his kicks murdering Yemenis disagree. I didn't want the United States to get more muscular with Iran. So he breaks the accord. This accord signed by multiple nations: United States, China, Russia, France, UK, Germany, etc., etc. I've bitched and moaned, and I've given my analysis on this, so I'm not going to go through that part again. What I am going to ask is, what does the EU do? Right? What does the European Union do? This is an interesting question because this pits the EU and their massive economy against the United States and its massive economy. What does the EU do? The United States has already put tariffs that is going to affect Europe. Now what? Fact is, the European Union has decided that they're going to stick with the deal because Iran hasn't broken any tenets of the deal. Why are we going to throw away something that seems to be working, that all of the people who are impartial in this process and even people who are anti-Iran believe this process is doing what it's supposed to do, so we're sticking with the deal. So the only person who pulled out was the United States. Here's the catch, though. The United States is reinstating sanctions on Iran. If it reinstates sanctions on Iran and Europe does not reinstate sanctions on Iran and Europe continues to do business with Iran, what happens with Europe and the United States relations? And do United States companies or European companies get hit with those sanctions? So, someone named Neil Clark showed something that got me thinking. European countries between 90 and 180 days to wind down their operations in Iran, or they will risk severe consequences, according to a statement released by White House. I don't know if that's true, so ignore that part. Nations must work together to halt the Iranian regime's destabilization drive for regional hegemony, the Trump administration said. Now, I've been looking for this, and I have not been able to find where Trump said this. But I started thinking, okay, that sounds right, though. You can imagine that if you're talking about you're reimposing sanctions, and the European countries have said, fuck that. They've broken no deal. You're the only one who's breaking a deal here, and you're breaking a deal with no evidence or anything. Your reality show host, and you're breaking a deal on an international geopolitical stage. Fair enough. Does this apply to European companies? So one of the things I was reading in the New York Times hit upon this. Iran said it will remain in a deal which tightly restricts its nuclear ambition for a decade or more. So did France, Germany, and Britain, raising the prospect of a transatlantic clash as European companies face potential American sanctions for their involvement with Iran. China and Russia, also signatories to the deal, are likely to join Iran in accusing the United States of violating the accord. Now, all of these countries are pointing the finger at the United States and saying, it's your fault. You did it. If you're attacking our companies, it's because you did something that the rest of the world, completely disagrees with. Now, the question becomes, is that enough? That's fascinating. This becomes international politics. What does Europe do when its companies are being attacked by the United States? It's something they find to be completely bogus. The United States is breaking a deal, breaking an international agreement, and in breaking an international agreement is now attacking their companies. What does the EU do? That's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I'd be more fascinated with it if I was looking at it in a third person and not necessarily actually living it. So, Dick Morris. Neil Lockthescock is on Twitter. He played a clip of Dick Morris. I disagree a lot with Dick Morris, but sometimes Dick Morris is pretty lucid political analysis. And let's listen to what Dick Morris has to say about this. maybe I disagree with him. Let's listen to him and see if you agree.
By the American government on May 12th, which is the deadline, Trump tears up this agreement, gets out of it, and slaps sanctions back on Iran. If the Western allies object and say they won't go along with the sanctions, they're powerless, because the sanctions include secondary sanctions, which mean that any firm in Britain or France or Germany or anywhere who do business with Iran are subject to the sanctions by the American government and can't have access to the international banking system and can't do any business in the United States. And under this threat, they're all going to withdraw. So this is really an area where unilateral U.S. power can be effective. And I hope we go ahead with it, despite Secretary Kerry's attempt literally from the grave to change our foreign policy. Thanks for watching.
That's amazing. If that's true, if that's what they agreed to, that's amazing. That's amazing. They've let one country unilaterally dictate all of the regulations of a particular trade deal, and it made them toothless in the process. Now the question becomes, is Dick Morris right? Dick Morris has been a political hatchet man for the past 20, 30 years. He's been this kind of political guy that Democrats go to, and I guess at this point now Republicans go to, because Democrats have, well, Republicans go to. Or something different. You may call Dick Morris something different. He's not as rabid as the other ones, and sometimes he has decent ideas, but nevertheless. In this case, I guess the question becomes, is what Dick Morris saying true? Has the European leaders set themselves up in a way where they're essentially paper tigers? Them staying with the deal itself doesn't really mean anything, because the companies that are involved won't necessarily deal with Iran because they don't necessarily want to live up to the sanctions. So regardless of what the political leaders say, the business community is going to do something else, because the European leaders may just be doing this for theater, knowing they don't have a dog in the hunt or tools to do anything about it. Now, that's assuming, again, Dick Morris is right. That's assuming it's right. Dick Morris may not necessarily be right. He may not necessarily know all of the tools and toolkit of the EU to actually do something about their businesses being attacked by United States trade policy. We'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, the United States is violating a trade deal. And in violating that trade deal, flagrantly violating the trade deal, it's turning around and attacking European companies that are doing business with Iran, who has not broken the regulations of that deal. What Dick Morris is saying here, from a political standpoint, from purely internal politics, may make sense. From an international stage, dealing with agreements and everything else, it's nonsense. You've destroyed any level of the United States high ground, and the European leaders, regardless of what you say, for the most part, you've broken a deal. All of those countries, Russia, China, France, all of them in unison believe that you broke a deal. You broke a trade deal. You don't have any kind of moral clout. You don't have any political cloutness. You may have this kind of raw force that you're exerting on the rest of the globe. And from that standpoint that Dick Morris is saying. But what does this do from the standpoint of any other nation trusting the United States? Anything that needs to get done from an international standpoint, anything that needs to get done that the U.S. may have an interest in or may want something to do that includes the EU, you can get none of that stuff. You've destroyed your credibility from an international standpoint, and that's a big fucking deal. And I'm not completely convinced that Dick Morris is right on this. The EU is a massive, massive trade and economic organization. Them putting their weight behind something, I don't think that's insignificant. But again, Dick Morris may be right. So we'll see. Yeah, I'm going to end it at that. I'm not going to keep this one long. 9 minutes. It's not horrible. But what it boils down to is, what are the powers that the EU possessed in this particular situation? That's what it boils down to. The EU saying, we're staying with the deal. What does that mean? We're staying with the deal. Does that mean they're going to back up their companies that are doing business with Iran so that the United States doesn't attack them? What does that mean? I don't know the letter of that, meaning I don't know the fine details that they're using by the term staying. All of these are saying they're signatories of the deal. They're not saying they're going anywhere. All of them saying the United States broke that deal. The United States saying it's imposing sanctions. What are the companies that are part of the EU going to do? And what is the EU going to do in response to their companies being attacked by sanctions? And are the companies just going to automatically stop dealing with Iran just to not deal with the hassle of sanctions? In which case, it doesn't really matter if the EU stands by Iran. The United States still gets his way. Stay tuned. We will see. So, that being said, the New York Times is right. Their companies are going to be subjected to those sanctions if they deal with Iran. So, we'll see what happens. Political theater, man. Stay tuned. All right, guys. If you enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe, and of course, you can always support through Patreon. Thanks, guys.